Hey, my name is Jim, and I have a website called sp500chart.com where I daily do a technical analysis video of the S&P 500. I've been doing that since fall of 2010, and we've had great success, have remained ever since then doggedly bullish on stocks. But I started doing some reading, stock chart reading of some cryptocurrencies, and particularly the Ethereum US dollar chart. And that's what we're going to look at right now. But I got to remind you that if you go to my website or look at this video, you got to understand it's for educational purposes only. Nothing stated at the site or in this video is intended to be used as investment advice. I can draw these lines on charts, but you have to draw your own conclusions from your own research and make investment decisions that are suitable for your personal financial situation. I am not a licensed financial professional. I'm just a guy who draws lines on charts. So let's take a look at Ethereum. This might take a little while because we got a lot of things to talk about. So let's get started. Okay, let's start out here looking at a one-day chart. This actually goes all the way back to where this Bitfinex started their charting data. And you can see here that we have a support line drawn right here. And I believe that support line is a strong trend line. In other words, I believe that is a legitimate trend line on this chart. We've got 2 points really to define it, that being February of 2017 and then the very recent upturn that we just had that took us above about a 6-month long consolidation pattern, and that consolidation pattern is shown right here in between these red lines. What is consolidation? Well, consolidation is where things go back and forth within a range, and buyer and seller sort of duke it out to try to figure out, well, you know, we're just exchanging here. We're just if it were a stock, you'd say shares are trading hands, but nothing's going up, nothing's really going down. Now, let's be honest. When Ethereum, and again, when I say Ethereum, I'm talking Ethereum US dollar chart, okay? For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to call it Ethereum. This chart looks very different if you're looking at Ethereum versus Bitcoin, okay? It's going to look different if you're looking at Ethereum versus some other currency. I'm talking US dollar. So we got up to 400, remember, back in June, and then sold all the way back to the mid-100s. And that is a huge move. And when it happened, it was an ugly move. It really, like, oh my gosh, the wheels are coming off here. But there is a real upside to that kind of extreme move when it takes place in a consolidation area. And the upside is that extreme move from over 400 to about 145 or so is how you define the expectation of what happens when you get out of that consolidation area. Okay? In other words, the depth of the pattern defines the target. So with that in mind, folks, now that we are up and over this target, not this target, now that we're up and out of this consolidation pattern, which, by the way, I think you would call it you could call it one of two things. You could call this an ascending triangle, where the lower support line is rising and the upper resistance line is, for the most part, flat. Or, if you want to, you could even call this one a cup and a long handle. Whatever you want to call it, we are now over this line of resistance, so we know we measure our target, again, the depth of this pattern added on to where we broke out, and in this particular case, that gives us a target of just a little bit under $1,100 for Ethereum. That's pretty strong stuff. Now, I am also measuring this thing pretty conservatively. A lot of people would say you measure the height of the pattern not here, but some people would say, no, you go back to the first touch you had that resulted in a turnaround to one of the other lines. And if that's the case, then we would have a target that's closer to 1,500 or 1,400. But I'm going with a conservative thing here. So we've got with this breakout above this red line, that tells us we have a target that is around 1,100 US dollars per Ethereum. Now let's move in and look at things on an hourly chart. And we see a couple of other things happening here. Here's that breakout. We moved up, started to sort of slide sideways and upwards. That ended up being a setup for a horrific feeling back test that took place yesterday. Yesterday morning, we briefly got over 500, and then before you could blink an eye almost, we were back under 400. And people are going, what the heck? Folks, some of the most wicked sell-offs you will see are a back test after a breakout. Here's your breakout, and now this sudden, swift, and really just a torrid, it felt rough. So anyway, hey, don't let anybody fool you. These things are incredibly volatile. So what happens now? Well, we sort of were looking at this, and I mentioned online yesterday that I thought if the 380s hold, then Ethereum should be fine. So now let's move in and look at things on a 15-minute chart. One of the things I mentioned yesterday was now that we have come back down effectively to back test this level that we got over, okay? In other words, we broke out over this red line. It's totally normal behavior after a breakout to come back to where you came from, as if to say, was that for real? Okay? So you back test it. You find out that, yes, there is support there. And I mentioned yesterday that we should be looking for the signs of some kind of a reversal pattern. And we have it in the form of an inverted head and shoulders pattern. This pattern alone, if you measure the depth of it, points us back to over 500. So I think Ethereum is fine here. I think we may find some little struggles here and there, okay, for, you know, that high 450s put up a little bit of a fight that we're doing now. I think 480 could be a little tough because that's where we first saw that big swoon yesterday. Once 480 broke, it just all of a sudden the wheels came off. So 480, if we get up there this afternoon, or you know, it could even happen later. But 480 may put up a bit of a fight. Now also, one other thing to keep in mind with the idea that we back tested this line, it's very probable and not uncommon if we back tested this trend line as well. It's not a necessity, but it could happen. So a return at some point to the 420s would not be out of the question. I'm going to throw one more trend line on this chart because a typical place where you find support after a breakout from an inverted head and shoulders pattern is a line that is drawn from the bottom of the head to the bottom of the right shoulder, and that would be this little line that I just put down right there. So we have two candidates now for support. Let me change the color of that. We'll just make that green for lack of any other, no particular reason. It's also possible, while I got you here, it is also possible that this is not the correct neckline. In other words, this looks like an inverted head and shoulders pattern, and I believe it's going to behave like an inverted head and shoulders pattern, but it is possible that with whatever action we see happening later today, we could actually have this as our neckline, in which case a return maybe to this green line and then up here. And if that happens, then we have a target that is around the 530s to 540 area. But for now, since we're dealing with this, and I believe both of these things could be true. In other words, this is an inverted head and shoulders pattern, and it could also have a secondary pattern sort of overlaid over the top of it that could mean we get a bit higher. But let's see how things flesh out. So guys, that is what we're dealing with in Ethereum. Hey, if this meant anything for you, you can send me a small tip to the following QR code, or just look down here. There's my there's a wallet. You can send it to an address. You can send a small fraction of an Ethereum. And hey, I want to thank you for taking time to check this out. And let's see what this thing does. Let's see if we indeed get over 1,000 here in the months ahead. I think we are. I think that is going to happen. So once again, thanks for watching. There's the QR code. There's my Ethereum address. Feel free. So take care. Thanks again for watching.